Hey guys, so today we're going to be doing the Brembo brake upgrade on my 91 Legacy. So I want to do just a quick overview of everything that you'll need. This is going to be pretty much the same as any 5x100 Subaru Brembo conversion that you're doing. So this would also apply to GC8s or GD-WRXs. Pretty much the same process, a lot of the same parts, if not all the same parts. First thing you need, obviously, is a set of Brembos. These are pretty dirty. I still have to clean them up. Not perfect, but got them for a really good deal. These brake lines I will not be using, I don't think, because I already have braided stainless lines, and I believe they're the same. We'll, double check when we install them. Other thing you're going to need for the rear right away is adapter brackets. These are a little bit vehicle specific as far as earlier Subaru, newer Subaru, whatever, but if it's not an STI knuckle, it will need a conversion bracket. This one, then also got rear brake pads and hardware. These are just posi quiet, pretty straightforward. The main issue with putting Brembos on a 5x100 Subaru is the rear parking brake, and you have two main options. You can either get the parking brake shoes, because basically this inner diameter here is larger on the STI, and so you can get thicker shoes that take up like an extra 5 mil on each side, I think, or maybe 10 mil on each side. I think it's from like a 170 mil to 190, and then you have thicker shoes that will fill the gap, and you can use regular STI rotors that are just off the shelf, which is great as long as they're an 04 to get the 5x100 lug pattern. But the issue with that is that if you use the parking brake a lot on gravel or drifting in snow, they can come apart, and it's also slightly more expensive than the other option, which I ended up going with. So this is a DBA rotor, and that's the part number. And it is a slotted rotor that's 5x100 and has this smaller inner diameter. And this is cheaper right out of the gate by a little bit. Long term, it will be harder to find new rotors. But at the same time, I've had the same rear rotors on this car forever, and considering how much bigger these are and higher quality than what I have on now, I doubt that it's going to be a problem for a very long time. So, but something to be aware of. It is like a special rotor, so getting replacements in the future will be more difficult. And I do like the slotted look and the fact that they paint the centers. That's nice. For the front, there's one with some Hawk pads. These are, I believe, like the Hawk Street Performance pads. Yeah, Street 5.0. There's part number. Pretty straightforward. The front is just basically going to bolt right on as long as you have a 5x100 rotor. I ended up going with the DBA dual lug rotor, so this is 5x114 and 5x100. You can find only 5x100 rotors, but I really wanted the DBAs, and I was having a hard time finding them at all through parts warehouses and things, so there's a part number for that. I do wish they were slotted like the rears, but this will allow me to get them resurfaced if I need to in the future. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Obviously you need your calipers. Front's just gonna pretty much just bolt on. The rear's obviously a little bit more complex, but we're gonna get it done. So one other thing that I want to mention before we get started is obviously having wheels that clear Brembos. These wheels are just some Koenigs, Koenig run lights, 17 by, I think 7.5, maybe 8, can't quite remember. But obviously Brembos are very large calipers, and only certain wheels clear them, so whether you get some 04 BBSs or something else, just do your research and be aware that your wheels may not fit. 17 is required for sure, and offset and spoke design is going to play into whether or not they fit a lot. I have done some research on these before I bought them and saw them on STIs no problem, so Should be good on that. Obviously we'll test fit. The speed lines that are on my WRX way out there, Speedline ST2s, that used to be on this car, I would love to still have on, but from all the research I've done, they just don't fit over the brakes. I could use spacers. We'll probably grab one of them just to do a test fit to see how far off it is, just because I do love those wheels on this car. They're, you know, somewhat period correct for this car, and they just look so good on it. So we'll probably grab one of those and just try just to see, but the plan is to use these wheels. So I just want to do a quick size comparison. It's a good upgrade. These are actually, got these calipers at the junkyard. They're 2011 Legacy brakes. So they're quite a bit bigger than factory for this car. And they're still good, so I'm going to use these on a different project. But if you have the factory rotor for this car, it'd be an even bigger difference. Let's see if I can hold this camera between my legs. Yeah, you can see it's quite a bit different. Alright, so we got them just test fit on here real quick. One thing I wanted to note is the, I don't know if I can show you, but the hardware, the bolts that hold the caliper on are actually larger. They have a 19mm head on them, and I believe they're longer. So if you're buying calipers, try and make sure you get the hardware with it, and if not, just be aware you're going to have to buy some. But yeah, just looking at it, it looks pretty sick so far. I have the camera on wide angle, so it looks kind of small in the wheel well, but and then as far as pads go, the only thing you need to worry about is the scraper. As a general rule, the scraper always goes on the inside and on the bottom. So you can see if I put it on this caliper, it'll be on the inside and top. I believe there's only one of these pads that has a scraper. So this pad is actually going to go on the inside on the driver's side, other side. And the cool thing about Brembos is that these just slot in, assuming the pistons are pushed back, which they're not yet. So you get in there, push the pistons back a little bit, and then just slot these in. So just like any other 4-piston caliper, there's a slide pin. The style goes in from the back, goes in, plugs that hole right there through each pad. This is a piece of hardware that keeps spring tension on the pads to keep them pulled out. And then this clip goes in a little hole in the pin and just hold it in place, just like that. It's probably the easiest caliper to put pads in, honestly. And always, obviously, when you're installing any caliper, make sure that the bleeders are on top. Brembos have a bleeder on each side, but you can see the bottom should not have a bleeder. Air goes up, so when you're bleeding it, if you have the bleeders on the bottom, you'll never ever get the air out. So, well, just like I was saying about doing your research with wheel fitment, these wheels do not clear. They have a little 5mm spacer in there, the silver part. And that makes it clear, but you can see just how close it is. I mean, especially right here on the corner. That's probably like a 1.5 mil gap with a 5 mil spacer. So when I looked up pictures of these wheels with Brembos and they said that they fit, I guess either they lied and they used spacers, or maybe they were a 50114 version of these wheels that had a different offset. But yeah, pretty frustrated with that. But at that point, if I have to run a spacer, I might end up using the speed lines instead of these wheels. So now we have to go grab one of those and see how close one of those is to fitting. So just a minute. So here's the speed lines with the Brembos, which you may or may not agree, but I think these look way better. But these have two 5 mil spacers, so that's a 10 mil spacer needed. And you can see there's practically no stud engagement, meaning extended studs will be a must. The main reason that sucks is at least on the rear, in order to get them in, you have to pull the wheel bearing apart. So kind of just opens up a whole can of worms of doing wheel bearings on the car, which wouldn't be terrible anyway. It's been a while since I've done these, but yeah, I mean, the look of the speed lines with the Brembos is obviously the way to go. I was just really trying to avoid running wheel spacers. I'm not a fan of them for safety and practicality and just all the reasons. But at this point, it's either a 5 mil spacer with the wheels that I don't really want over these, or a 10 mil spacer with these. And so I might end up just ordering a 10 mil spacer, like a spacer set, one that's obviously hub centric to the hub. That's what these are. These are 5 mil, so these fit the Subaru hub perfectly. So it's not going to slot around on you. Not as safe as a bolt-on spacer, and not as safe as no spacer, but it is what it is. It's kind of where I'm at, so gonna have to find some spacers and order them. And so on a positive note, the Koenigs do look good on the WRX, so they'll stay on there. Alright, so it's been a couple days. Got some wheel spacers in the mail. Really fast shipping, garageline.com. They make custom wheel spacers, and these are Subaru specific. I believe they're both 5x100 and 5x114. They're 10 mil, and they're hub centric on the inside and outside, which is great, because hub centric is important. They also come with grade 10 studs, which is great. So I might actually use those instead of the ARPs, just because the ARPs are already installed in some hubs and I'd have to press them out. These, obviously I could just get them in. But so far pretty happy with these. And this is the fitment. I don't know if I can get it to focus. Focus. I was having a hard time, but you can see it does clear. The caliper is not torqued yet, but it is pretty snug, so I don't think it's moving anymore. Obviously you can see the need for extended studs, but I do like the black wheel spacer instead of the silver. It blends in a little bit more with the rotor, and everything just looks so sick. Finally have speed lines with Brembos. It's been like the dream combo for a long time. Also got new tires mounted up on these wheels. Continental DWS 06s, as always. Still need to clean the crap off them, but yeah, looking good. Still need to bleed the front, install the, well, first install the studs. So we'll pull the brakes back off, get the studs in there, and then put everything back on, bleed the front brakes, and move on to the rear. Okay, so in the time lapse you probably just watched, so I pulled the brakes back off,
I removed the tone ring, which on a first gen Legacy and possibly GC8s as well, they have this old school tone ring that sits behind the hub and bolts on with these little Allen bolts here. Real easy to unbolt, but then it's basically stuck behind the hub and the knuckle. That isn't even being used anymore. You can see I have no wheel speed sensor right there. I've completely deleted ABS on this car. Not really concerned about it. I really just wanted to get rid of them to save the weight. So I just took a hammer. They break really easy, so I just tapped on it with a hammer right there, cracked it on one side, rotated it, cracked it on the other side. Honestly, super easy. You don't even need to hit it very hard. So now that's gone, can be out of the way. And hammered out our extended or our regular studs, which are a knurled press fit into the hub like that. So you just hammer them out the back. There's room for them to come in and out where the caliper would be, and luckily on the front there's plenty of room to get the extended studs in. So first thing you want to do is make sure that the knurled portion is the same diameter as your original studs. Obviously they do come in different sizes, different knurlings and things, so just make sure they're the same, and we'll press them in. This is a stud installer tool. It's basically just a bearing with a conical face on the other side. So basically just slip that over and then put on our lug nut, and we'll use the impact gun to suck it in. I'll try and get a camera angle, but you're basically going to watch this backside and pull it in with the impact gun until it gets flush with the hub. That's basically the goal. And just so you guys are aware, if you don't have this tool, for years I just used a stack of washers with either grease or anti-seize in between them to allow them to slip like a bearing. It's not nearly as nice as using one of these, and these tools are not expensive, so I do suggest getting one. But if you're trying to do it right now and you don't have the tool, just grab a stack of washers and some grease or something and grease them up, and you basically just want to take up the space that the wheel would take up so that you don't run out of threads and damage anything. So you can do it that way. One installed, now I'll just do the others. Okay, we got all of them pressed in, all flush on the back, all of them perfectly straight. So now we will start reassembling. Alright, now we got the same procedure done on this side. Same thing, extended studs, swap the caliper over, little tiny old caliper, big old new caliper. So now we can move on to the rear. Alright, so for the rear we're going to start by obviously just pulling the caliper off. So unbolt it, get the caliper and the rotor off, and then we will be trimming the backing plate more than likely. On past Brembo conversions I've done on newer Subarus, I have to trim this backing plate just where it bends right here. So we'll just take a cutoff wheel, just cut it, and then clean up the edge and paint it black again. That's just to fit the bigger rotor, because you can see it, the backing plate's a little bent right there, but it does cup around the rotor. So, and then also for the uninitiated, the Turbo Legacy rear brakes are actually really good. They're the same diameter rotor as a WRX, like that car, but it is a vented rotor instead of a solid rotor. So this setup I might end up upgrading on that car with, or upgrading another Legacy. Regardless, gonna keep this setup. The rotors aren't the best, they're slotted and drilled like from China crap, but they're not warped, and the pads are still good. So definitely going to be holding on to this setup for another project. Okay, so the plan is, because on the rear, we don't have enough room, even with the parking brake removed, to get the extended studs in, because they're just too long. You can change OEM studs out, no problem, but the extended studs you cannot. So first of all, we have the same tone ring style. We'll be unbolting, breaking off, and then we're going to remove the parking brake shoes, and we're going to remove that wheel speed sensor right there, which bolts in from the back right there. And the hope is that with that wheel speed sensor removed, we will have a hole to put in the extended studs without taking the hub off, which would mean pulling the wheel bearing apart, which I'd obviously prefer not to do if possible. If we have to, we will, but I'm going to try that first and just see how it goes. And those wheel speed sensors tend to get seized in there, which is why it's still there in the first place. So I'm gonna see if it comes out easy, and then hopefully it's a big enough diameter to actually fit the stud in. That's the other question. Okay, so I did have success, just not in the way that I was planning on it. First of all, got the wheel speed sensor out. This hole is actually slightly too small for the stud. Let me see if I can find one. Here's one. So, as you can see, stud doesn't quite fit in there. I could have shaved it down, but then I'd be losing the strength of the stud itself. Around where it holds itself flat, so I don't really want to do that. Would have been a pain to grind out that hole larger, so what I did was basically took the shoe off, took the bottom spring and adjuster off, took the center support piece out of the middle, and then basically put the stud in just like this, and it was pretty much, sorry, I'm trying to get a good camera view, but it's pretty much wedged in the hole, just barely not able to go around the corner. And I just took a punch and I just tapped it gently that way, and it popped around the corner, didn't mess up the threads. So huge win, not having to do the wheel bearings again, because as you can see, these studs aren't even old because they came on the hub, which I did a few years ago. So these wheel bearings are still totally good. So now I'll knock out the rest of the studs and do it exactly like I just did. So this is what it looks like right before I tapped it in. So you have to focus. Sorry, it won't focus. But essentially it just needs to have a little bit of a nudge. So I'm just going to take the hammer and the punch and tap on it there and get it around the corner. Just like that. And we got our stud. Okay, so you can see the consequence of doing it this way without taking the wheel bearing apart is we've very slightly damaged two threads right there on each stud. So the nut didn't want to go on just with my fingers, so I just held this end with some pliers and it still zipped on just fine, and that'll be less of a problem once the stud is held in place normally, and I'm sure it'll clean itself up just taking the nut on and off a few times. So just be aware of what the consequence of how I did it was, which is not technically the right way to do it, but the right way to do it is kind of dumb considering it's just a stud. So with this particular length stud, this worked. With anything just slightly longer, it would not work. So I can't really speak to what length of stud you have. I can measure these to let you guys know what they are later. Okay, so this stud, let's see, and 0, this is the extended stud, is about 64 mil, 63.9, as much as you trust this plastic Pittsburgh. And the factory one, 46.6. So if your stud is any longer than 64 mil, I would not recommend doing it the method that I did. I'd probably have to take the wheel bearing apart to do that. But definitely got lucky with these, so yep. Okay, so I'm going to show you what the problem is with the backing plate. So this backing plate, as you can see, is going to hit the rotor. It's just too small, so we are going to cut it right along this edge with the cutoff wheel, and then get it all painted up. I had a quick change of plans. Saw that the backing plate on this car was actually just this little tiny piece, and held on just by spot welds. So I just real easily ground off the spot welds and twisted it off. Right here, just took the grinder to it, and then all these spots will spray paint black. Alright, so got the all those spots painted up, and then I just real quickly loosely threw on the adapter bracket, see how it's going to fit. Absolutely love this adapter bracket, looks great, fits great. So our giant rear rotor can go on easily and not be rubbing on anything. So now we should be able to bolt on our caliper. And again, this is the conversion rotor to fit the parking brake of the Legacy. So now that is really cool to see. Like, I'm excited to see the fronts on and everything, but the rears are an actual challenge to get on. So I really love seeing that, and just the size of the rear rotor is insane. Like, having big front rotors, relatively normal on newer cars. Giant rear rotors like this, just, I don't know, it's badass. I love it. Need to get the other side done and then check the parking brake operation. Obviously I haven't hooked up the brake line yet, haven't took the old caliper off yet, haven't bled brakes yet, but I think before I bleed brakes I'll be making sure that the parking brake is adjusted properly and happy with the new rotors, just because they're the conversion rotors. I don't know if it's the exact same, so we'll see on that. So yeah, might get started on the other side now. Alright, front calipers are torqued to 65 foot-pounds, rears are torqued to 45 foot-pounds. I'm going to about 50, but that's the torque specs we used. And then we're going to start bleeding the brakes back here. Always start at the farthest caliper from the master cylinder, so in this country we're going to go right rear. And then these have 2 bleeders on each caliper, and you always want to go inner and then outer. So we're going to go right rear, inner, outer, and then left rear, out, inner, outer, and then front right, and then front left. Alright, so we got Brembo's all done, car's on the ground. I have a lot of stuff in the way, but looks pretty good on the ground, especially with the speed lines back on it. You can see it's pretty wide. Might have to roll the fenders a bit more, I guess we'll find out.
Also have these that will be going on, so we'll figure that out at the same time. But I'm going to throw these on at work just so I can align it at the same time. Got teen coilovers with the teen covers, which is sick. These are made for a GC8, so the fronts I know I'll have to adjust the ride height just because I have the GD front subframe and stuff, and I have a friend who did the same setup, and he had to raise the front coilovers even though they come pre-set up. You had to raise the front ones about an inch to make it drivable with the wider track width, having the wider control arms and everything. So mess with that at work and align it at the same time. And then just kind of off camera, we resealed this valve cover because it started leaking. So I got a new OEM gasket in there. For whatever reason, the old one kind of rolled a little bit. So hopefully that's good. And we painted the trim here. So came out pretty decent. It's not as reflective as the OEM paint. It's got a little texture to it, but looks way better than the flaking with chrome underneath that we had before. So yeah, looking good. Basically just going to take it out and test drive and make sure the brakes are working. We need to wash it really bad. We're doing prep for Big Northwest right now, which is in less than a month. So I dug out my old wing. Plan is to get this painted. As you can see, it has no paint on it at all, which is why it's not on here, and I just have these crappy looking caps plugging the holes. So the plan is to get that painted, put on the car, get the coilovers on the car with the rear set properly low, because as you can see, the rear does not sit very low with the ProDrive springs. Get it sitting nice and low, make it look nice, buff it, wax it, and that's pretty much it. So, and he's got some plans for the Blue Wagon as well. So, kind of in crunch time to get ready for that. So, just gonna go test drive right now. Everything went great. Car drives great. Pedals very solid. Stops absolutely fantastically. So overall, very happy with the upgrade, especially the looks of it. Looks absolutely ridiculous in this car. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments. We'll be sure to answer them.